Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co. Today we're going to review Uncharted. So the director is Ruben Fleischer. Time is 1 hour 56 minutes. So a little longer than an hour and a half, but I think for an action film it's okay. Actors are Tom Holland as Nathan Drake. Mark Wahlberg plays Victor Sullivan. Antonio Banderas plays Santiago Moncada. Sophia plays Chloe Frazer. And Tati Gabrielle plays Braddock. So you have this aspiring bartender with a long-lost brother who ran away from this nunnery when they were growing up. And he kind of disappeared off the face of the map. This bartender is also kind of moonlights as a thief, and he's approached by this other adventurer. He's like, hey, you want to go on this great adventure? I work with your brother, and we're looking for the lost treasure of Magellan. He doesn't believe him, but then he's like, well, let's do this. Let's go find my brother, right? So after that, they're kind of pursued by the Moncada family, who has been looking for this treasure as well. So you have you have the villains and the good guys, right? So there's a little bit of a plot hole in the story because they go into water several times, but they have cell phones on them. So you're like, how are their cell phones still surviving? Like if you drop it into 1 or 2 feet and then you come out, maybe the cell phone's fine, But I mean, unless they're really hardened cases that are waterproof, you're probably going to ruin all those cell phones, and they're in the water repeatedly, and then they keep working, and then these cell phones just last for a week without charging. I mean, obviously they're not going to show the charging, that'd be boring, but it's kind of like a little bit of a plot hole. These phones probably wouldn't stand up to water at least, but it's a movie, so you overlook it. There's kind of a fun twist in the movie. You don't know who works for who, with the good guys, the bad guys, which villain are they behind. So that's kind of a fun feel to the plot. There's also several sets of villains. First you think it's one guy, and then it turns out to be someone else. So you're like, oh, who's the worst villain out of this? And there's a lot of betrayal back and forth between different people who work for one set, and then they switch sides. And you're like, why are they switching sides? So it's kind of fun. A lot of great sets, I think, and puzzles that they build up that they have to kind of figure out, which is very true to the game. In the game, you go through and kind of puzzle solve scene to scene to scene. So in this, they have to puzzle solve scene to scene to scene to find a treasure. So that's really cool, I think. Pretty true to the game. It's a fairly good cast. I'm not sure about the role of Sully. Sully in the video game is kind of this aged, weathered, really like hardened face looking guy. Mark Wahlberg, I think he just looks too young. He's not young. He's actually the right age for the character. But he doesn't look weathered at all. He's obviously, taking care of his skin, living in Hollywood. He's not this weathered seaman look, so that doesn't really fit in a way. Probably younger Sean Connery would probably be more appropriate. Like Sean Connery in his, young 50s might have worked really well, or maybe even mid 50s would have looked really good as Sully. But Mark Wahlberg just looks a little bit too young. For an action film, though, it's kind of more practical. It's more believable. Like if you look at the latest Indiana Jones, when Harrison Ford is like 70 or 80 or something, you're like, it's so only unbelievable he's swinging on ropes, and you're like, there's no 70-year-old that goes swinging on ropes, right? So in that case, they're kind of pushing it too hard about who should play the roles. But so age-wise, I think he's appropriate. He just doesn't look the part of Sully for me. He's a fun actor, though, obviously. They have this overall theme of greed leads to corruption, misfortune for everyone involved, which is a common plot film in these kind of adventure films where they're looking for the gold. They usually kind of find the gold, and then also at the end it's kind of like they get only a little piece of it, right? This is a very common thing. Like there's the one with Nicolas Cage when they're searching for some treasure based off the Constitution. Very similar plot line, I think. They had a fairly good setup at the very end with the sequel setting up to find the long lost brother. It was assumed in the film that he's been dead, but now it turns out at the very end of the film, like he's still alive apparently. So they're setting up for a sequel. Obviously, it probably depends on how this particular film does, whether they shoot it or not, obviously, right? They have a good start, I think, in the beginning of the film with the story of the two brothers. But then later when it turns out there's this betrayal that the brother went missing or was shot or something, and he was left behind, you're like, why wouldn't he be more mad at Sully? How could they? I don't think they'd be that close after that. And they kind of probably should have played that up, I think, a little bit more on the fractured relationship. I think they did a good job with the woman that plays kind of the sidekick that's, Sully says don't trust her at all. And he's like, why? She's trustworthy. And then it turns out she's not. So like I said, there's a lot of fun twists and turns between who works for who and all that. So I think that's the best part of the film. But yeah, I think I'd recommend it. It's a really fun film. I don't know if I collect it, but it's a fun film to watch. If you like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.